Once you have your bobbin of yarn that has been spun on your wheel, it's time to make that yarn into a skein. And this can be done with a variety of different skein winders, but the most common one for hobbyists or people who don't spin too much yarn, aren't working with a large quantity of skeins, is something called a Niddy Noddy. And so Niddy Noddy is a very simple device that winds the yarn around the knobs of this device to make it into a skein. So they come in various different sizes. The most common is a 2-yard Niddy Noddy, but there are different sizes as well. This one, for example, is a 2-yard. If you want to make a 1-yard skein though, you can wrap it around just 2 edges as opposed to all 4 of these knobs. These are very easy to make yourself, and they're also relatively inexpensive to buy compared to some of the larger skein winders that are quicker, but they can also be very costly. Most Niddy Noddies will have one edge where you will be able to easily slip the yarn off. You'll see why we use this later. Whereas the other edges have little knobs to keep the yarn from sliding off. Now it doesn't matter where you start winding the yarn on your Niddy Noddy, so pick a point and start from there. It's best to have your yarn on a lazy Kate or something that's going to allow the yarn to flow freely as you pull it off. You don't want a lot of tension while you're pulling the yarn, or that's going to stretch out the yarn while you're making it into its skein. Many wheels will come with their own lazy Kate. Start with the end of your yarn and your Niddy Noddy in your other hand. There are 2 ways to hold the Niddy Noddy. Some people hold it the shaft right here. I prefer to hold on to the end. I find this more comfortable and easier, but do whichever one works for you. You're going to wrap it around a few times to secure itself, and you may want to keep your thumb there to hold it just so it doesn't fall off at first. You're going to take it and bring it down to the opposite end, back up to the top again where you started, down to the corner that does not have the yarn on it yet, and back up to your starting position. So the yarn should look like this. It should be in a little bit of a 2 V shapes. One continuous motion around the entire Niddy Noddy. So you're going to continue this process throughout your entire skein of yarn, pulling it off your bobbin. It's also useful to count as you go. This way you know exactly how much yarn you have off of your bobbin. So one rotation around this whole skein, since it's a 2-yard Niddy Noddy, is going to be 2 yards. So I'm going to count it when I get up to here, and I'm going to count it when I get to here. So each one of those is 1 count. So for example, I'm starting at this top corner. I'm going to go back. Once I get to the top, I'm going to count 1, 2. So once I get back to my starting point, it should always be an even number, so you know if you're keeping track or not. So now since I've gone around this a total of 2 times, I'm going to have 4 yards on this Niddy Noddy so far. So now that we have a little bit more yarn on here, it's a little bit easier to see. So again, this is at our starting point. Take our starting point and go down the shaft to one of the opposite corners. From that corner, we're going to wrap it around, pull it back up to the opposite end of our starting point, bring it back down to the opposite end on the bottom again, and back up to our starting point. So again, it's going to look like this, kind of like 2 V shapes, and be in one continuous loop. And then you're going to continue doing that for the entire skein. And remember to count as you're winding it on. You can count however you wish. You can do it every time you get to your starting point and then just multiply the result by 2. Or you can count each yard as you get to the top and complete 1 rotation. Do make sure that you're not stretching the yarn too much if you can help it, but this method to a certain extent does put a little bit of tension on your yarn, so just be mindful of that as you're winding. Once you have all of the yarn wound onto your Niddy Noddy, you're going to take the ends of the yarn and tie it around this skein to secure those ends and also keep them from getting lost, so that when you go to use your yarn, you don't have to hunt for that end. And it's going to keep your skein nice and tidy so that it's not getting all tangled up. So you're going to take your end and you're going to split one section of the skein in half. And this is a figure 8 tie. You're going to slip it through that half, and it doesn't really matter where, it doesn't have to be exactly in half. Bring it around, and then you're going to make a figure 8 and go back through that half the other way. And then you're going to take it so it makes a complete figure 8. This doesn't matter too much as long as you've gone around and it makes a figure 8. And then I like to go back in the middle here and wrap it around the knot just a couple times. You can alternately take another scrap of yarn and tie a knot in a figure 8 around this, but I usually just do the ends of the yarn and it holds it very steady. And then you're going to do that again with your other yarn end that's going to be wrapped around right here where we started. You're just going to undo that and pull your end out and do another figure 8. So again, split it in half, go through the middle, come out the side, go through that middle again, come out and wrap it around, and then I like to go through the middle and just wrap it around a couple times to secure it. Now again, we were talking about this end that doesn't have the knob on it like these other ones. This is where you're going to remove your yarn from your Niddy Noddy. It makes it nice and simple to just slip it off, and then you're going to take it off the entire Niddy Noddy. And this is a freshly spun skein, so the yarn is not set yet, which is why it's nice and super twisty. This is going to be washed, and then after that it should lay nicely. So we have a continuous loop, which is our skein, and we're going to twist this up into what is commonly called a hank, but a lot of people call it a skein as well. Both are relatively correct. So you're going to insert your hands in either end of this loop of yarn, and then you are just going to twist your two arms and keep doing this. It's going to form a nice long twist. Once it's very twisty and you're having trouble rotating your arms, then you're just going to take it and fold it in half and let it twist up on itself and form a skein. Then you're going to take the two ends and loop them one over the other. This is going to create a completed skein of yarn from a Niddy Noddy.